Welcome to the Oxygen Advantage podcast with your host, Oxygen Advantage founder Patrick McKeown. With the Oxygen Advantage podcast, we aim to show how functional breathing is an essential part of a healthy and well-balanced lifestyle. Each episode, we meet experts in their field from around the world and talk about their lives, their experiences, and how they learned the importance of breathing. Join us and get inspired. Get the Oxygen Advantage.
You might be a runner, you might be just starting off, or you may even be an ultra runner. And this conversation is talking with Sid Garza-Hillman, who has written a book, Ultra Marathon Running for Normal People. So we want to untangle quite a bit here. And I know in our initial conversation, we were exploring Sid's work as a nutritionist and also as a coach, and somebody who's been practicing breathing for quite a bit of time. So Sid, you're very welcome. I think the conversation is going to be very interesting, and I know it's going to be slightly different from the norm that we do. So even just a little bit of background information, what do you do?
Yeah. Well, anyway, thanks for being here. I've been I'm an Oxygen Advantage coach, and that's for a reason. Looked around at different modalities, but more on that, I guess, later. Background on me, started off as an indie rock musician and had no designs on anything in the health arena, but an asthmatic, and cured my asthma through diet. Later wrote a book about that called Approaching the Natural, just about what I saw initially right away actually was that this is a bigger picture than food. Like way bigger. And so my first book was one chapter on food and the rest on everything else. The interesting thing is that book has nothing about breath in it. I had not gone into that world yet. And if it ever gets revised, I will put a chapter, obviously, because it's approaching the natural, how to do things in a modern world more naturally as human beings, as animals.
For people with asthma.
That's right. And so later I kind of get out of LA, just I escape out of Los Angeles, and I move into this. I still do music and everything, but I do this stress management coaching, and then also nutrition, also a certified running coach. But it's very much, and for a long time, stress management based first. And that's what got me into the research of, in general, stress management. I have a specific system I teach, but breath work, I became in there, and it has been such a game changer that with clients now as I coach, I'm breath work right out of the chute. I don't talk food because it's such a trigger point and it's so reactive. 6 weeks. I go, yeah, we'll talk about that later. Let's talk about how to come into your breath. Let's talk about how to improve your sleep. Let's talk about how to improve your endurance. Let's talk about how to improve your overall stress management. Then we'll gently slide into things like, improving your diet, et cetera, et cetera. So for a long time, I also direct an ultra marathon. Ultra running for normal people was coming out of seeing the people who run this 50K. It's a 33-mile run on trails with 5,000 feet of climb. And you would be shocked, the people who run this thing. These are, if you looked at them, you would be me. I run it. I've run 11 ultra marathons. I'm not an elite athlete by any stretch of the imagination. I am a father of 3. I have two jobs basically. I'm out there running slow, but I get it done. And this breath work has been huge in that regard too. So I'm very much focused on no knock, because I'm always inspired by them, but I'm focused on non-elite people who are trying to pull off amazing things in the context of otherwise busy and stressful lives. And so that's kind of where I've landed. I've had 4 books published, but the newest one is all in ultra running.
And if, say, for example, somebody who's listening, and because I always think it's great to introduce nasal breathing during physical movement, what would you say to them for the first time? So what are the things to keep an eye on, what to expect?
Yeah, well, I've been taping my mouth shut ever since I started learning your system and becoming certified as a coach in it. And so it takes a little bit of a transition because the sensitivity to CO2. I was a long-time mouth breather, and I'm talking, dry, bleedy gums. And I have 15-year-old twins and a 20-year-old. I hadn't felt rested and this is, I feel like I'm just like, buy Patrick's book, but I swear to you, I have not felt rested. I had not felt rested until I studied your program. And so I started taping my mouth shut. And for a while, I'd tape my mouth shut, 2 a.m., I'd wake up and rip it off because I feel like I was going to suffocate. 6 weeks later, and from then on, it's been about 4 years. I tape my mouth shut at night and I wake up in the morning. I've converted my wife. My kids think we're absolutely insane. They go, good night. And we're both sitting there with, I kiss my wife. We both tape up and go to sleep. However, no snoring. And I wake up feeling rested. I wake up getting out of bed and going, oh, that's what it feels like to feel like you had a good sleep. And if you look and see how that translates into every other area of your life, how you perform at work, how you perform in your exercise, whatever it is, how you perform with your friends, how you perform with your kids, is such a game changer with when you wake up feeling good and you are knowing how to, do the thing. Anyways, so back to running, I'm a big slow running fan. Most days, very slow running, slower than people generally do. I talk about that in ultra running for normal people, slowing down because you're going 34 miles, not 3 miles.
How
And
fast? Sorry, how fast
uh,
could you walk at that speed? In other words,
not in my race. You would get cut off. You have to run most of the run, and then you
okay.
end up hiking the hills. For normal people, the pros, these men and women are it's unbelievable to watch. But
So, so it's
yeah,
at a faster pace than a fast walk.
oh yeah, you're running. You're running most of the
Yeah.
time. It's just
Okay.
that you hit hills on trails that are so steep, it's more efficient for you to hike than to
Of
run them.
course.
You're gonna waste more energy trying to run them. So you hike the hills, you run the flats and downhills. That's generally for most people how they'll pull off an ultra marathon. And so I transitioned to nasal breathing, and what I was going to say is I'm a big a big fan of slow running. And people always say you run at a conversational pace, which means if you can have a conversation while you're running, that's a pretty good pace. I actually use the nose breathing as a marker. In other words, if I can breathe through my nose, I'm going slow enough. I haven't run with a watch in years. I don't run with a watch. Set my timer on my phone. I put my phone in my pocket and I go. I do not want to pay attention to data at all. I don't upload anything. I have no social media. I don't go to Strava and look at I go out on a trail, and that allows me to connect to that given day. How am I feeling? And so sometimes my nasal pace is faster, and sometimes my nasal pace is slower, depending on how I slept, how I ate, how all those other factors play into it. This is not, being an athlete is not my full-time job. So, nasal breathing. Now, if you're on a trail, you hit a hill, you're going to go to mouth. That's how we're designed, as you know, is if you're under stress, you go to the mouth because you're kicking in so much CO2. You've got to wrap that up. But as soon as you hit the flat and the downhill, back to nose, back to calm. And that desensitization to CO2 allows you to recover from that initial spike and get back into the lower stress breathing. And that's just been, I hate to say game changer over and over again, but it really has been that profound in my life and with my clients.
And when you first transitioned from mouth to nose breathing, did you find it was a bit of a struggle? Was the air hunger a bit stronger? And if you don't mind me saying, do you wear a nasal dilator? I have to wear a nasal dilator when I do my exercise every morning. And the reason being is just because I have a really compromised nasal airway.
Yeah, well, so yes, 100, super difficult. I mean, super difficult. And to this day, and I got to tell you, like I'm way less sensitive. I'll talk about the timing of breath that I have been experimenting with over the last year. But on given days, I am, feeling for whatever reason more sensitive to it. So I slow down even more, and that's a mental challenge for me. It's not like I don't know how to slow down, but I have that little thing in me that goes, "Oh, I'm going too slow," and I have to have that conversation of like, "No, you're not. This is appropriate. This is actually how you do this, and don't get injured and continue to do ultra marathons at 56 years old." So, how to manage your stress along the way. However, I do use a nasal. Most runs no, but on race day, I will use a nasodilator. Now, the joke I make is my nose is clearly big enough to bring in some air. However, the passages are super narrow, especially on the right side. So I have a little plastic thing that pops up in there. And by the way, sometimes I sleep with that too, depending on, what's going on in the middle of the night. If I'm feeling something, I'll just pop that in there and then back to sleep.
Oh, yeah, no, I totally get it because, if the nasal airway is compromised, you don't want to be forcing the airflow either. I just find it very interesting that you're listening to your body and you're changing the pace in accordance with how you're feeling, that perception of breathlessness. And really, it makes total sense.
Yeah, sure. And I have to be clear for your listeners. I'll say this 1,000 times, though I need to. I'm not trying to win a race.
Mm.
I'm trying to have a great experience. I'm trying to recover fast. I enjoy the sport. So that's why I stopped looking at time. I don't care about my watch. I really don't. The last run I did, I mean, I run my own course the day before. So I run 33 miles the day before my race, by the way, and then get up at 4 the next morning and direct my race all day. But I did the Lake Sonoma 55K, and that was a legit, it's a race. It's actually a marquee race, way bigger. And just my phone goes in my pocket. Boom, didn't look at it. And it was a long day. It was a very hard course. And I was out there for a long time. And a friend of mine came running toward me toward the end. And I go, "What are you doing out here?" She goes, "We were wondering where the hell you are." And I looked at my phone. I pulled my phone out of my pocket for the first time. And I was out there for 10 hours. And
Wow.
and there's like a text thread from my wife going, "Are you okay? Where you go? Like, what's going on?" Because nobody knew. And I was just kind of trucking along, just in my own world, and just that's how it goes. But I'm not trying to. I don't care. Like, I finished. I finished strong. I recovered. Next week I was running. Those are the things that are
Yeah,
important. I went back to work.
totally. And I'm often intrigued. I couldn't imagine myself ever doing that length. It's just for me totally off the wall.
Yep.
But people love it. When you're doing that, are you doing it with your attention on the run or on your breath or in the body, or do you just allow the mind to wander? In other
It's a
words,
it's a rotation. Like remember I remember as if you don't remember when you're coaching I like to transition as I'm coaching people in breath work from focus on the little hairs not moving, focus on the temperature differential between the inhale and the exhale, focus on your diaphragm all the way around expanding it. It's sort of a rotation. So when I'm on a trail, I would say it's mostly breath focused. That is true. I am breathing into my nose and keeping that thing going into the nose. But then I appreciate the surroundings. When you're on trails, most courses, including the one I direct, are breathtakingly beautiful. And so that's another reason why, to keep yourself at a lower stress state, you actually get to enjoy things. You're not focused on pace. You're not focused on you're focused on people. In my race, people stop and take pictures during the race. They don't care what place they came in. It's a 34-mile run, and on 2 days later, they got to go to work. So they're stopping, taking pictures, hanging out. That's a stress managed place to be. That's the stuff I love. That's why I wrote a book called Ultra Running for Normal People, because you may think it's crazy, but you could do it. And humans are the best endurance runners on the planet. We are not the fastest by any chance, but we're by any stretch of the imagination, but we're great endurance. But I believe most who are not elites, are overtraining for these races. They are putting themselves in inordinate amounts of stress in the training for these races. And they're also living busy lives. And so they have bad experiences at these things. Like, I did an ultramarathon. It was miserable. I go, yeah, because you're overtrained. And that's a weird conversation to have in the modern world, because it's always very push hard, no pain, no gain, weekend warrior kind of stuff. I am not type A. People I work with aren't type A people. We're not out there pushing. I like to sit on a chair and read a book, but I do ultra marathons. So it's a very hard to define kind of personality that I work with and am.
and you direct them as well. Does that mean that you're organizing them, or you're setting them up, or you're
One.
involved in the running of one of them?
No, so I do. It's called the Mendocino Coast 50K, and it's a race that I created and direct. It'll be in its 8th year. And it's a 34-mile loop. I'm the race director, so I created the race, but I organize it, and I have a friend of mine who helps. Otherwise, it's family. And this thing sold out. It's on April 19th, 4 minutes. Sold out in 4
Wow.
minutes. Yeah, I'm bringing people from over 17 states this year. Last year, I had UK, Canada, South Africa, Japan. I have no social media. This thing just 4 minutes. Part of that was because the book came out, but every year it's sold out. And again, it attracts people who are mostly not elite athletes. It's not a qualifier race. It's a very logistically easy race. I cap it at 150 runners. Right now, I have 140 on a wait list. And it's just this kind of really fun, accessible, hard. It's not a joke. It's not a super easy run. It's actually kind of middle to harder of the ultra marathon world. But yeah, so I direct it every year, and it's one of my many things that I do, and I
Wow.
love it. Yeah.
I did a 5K this morning, 5K yesterday morning, and I try and get them in now and try to make exercise my daily practice for a couple of years. How would you go from a 5K to a 50K?
I know it sounds daunting, doesn't it? Yeah, I know. I'm training a couple younger, they're 20, late 20s, 30s right now. And the number one thing I say is go slow. So I was the same guy you were. I was a 2-3 miles, recreational runner, and I could do about an 8.5 minute pace. Now this is before breath work, so probably well, definitely I wasn't breathing through my nose back then, but that's what I would sort of do 8.5 minute pace. Well, on a lark, I was feeling pretty good. I was 46 years old, and I decided to sign up for an ultramarathon. I had read Born to Run and found out people run on trails. I live in a really beautiful area, so I started just getting on trails to see what it was like, and I was like, this is it. Switch went off in my head. I was like, running on trails. Oh my gosh, it's not repetitive motion. You're kind of moving your body, and it feels. You walk sometimes. It's a whole nother world. But I actually found a guy to help me for the first couple months because I had no idea what I was doing. And the first thing he said was, he goes, slow down. He didn't talk about breath work, but he goes, slow down. I go, well, I can do 8 minute pace. He goes, not for 34 miles, you can't. So the game changed in my head of, okay, I can run 3 miles at 8.5 minute pace, but I have to think long view. This is very interesting to me as I'm coaching people in dietary changes, taking the long view. Don't do it all today because you're trying to do things for the rest of your life. So less stuff today. So the first thing I tell anybody is slow down. Almost, this is where it's funny because like machismo things came up. Like I'm running so slow and I'm like, I could go faster if I wanted to, like all the, because I don't know what pace you run. I was running 8.5 minute pace. I started running 12 minute pace. That is shockingly slower. You're shuffling along, but all of a sudden now I'm shuffling for 5 miles, then for 7 miles, then for 10 miles. Within a month or two, I'm running 12, 13, 14 miles. Coming home, energy for the rest of the day. My twins were very young. I'm playing with my kids all day, and I've just run a 12 mile. And the next day I go out for another 10 mile and feeling okay because I'm slowing down to that level. And since then, a few years later, I learned the breath work, and that's even been better in terms of recovery and bouncing back from a long run. But it is very much a slow running model. Most days, I mean, 90% of your runs, they say 80-20. I'm at almost 100% of your runs are so slow. So Patrick, if you went out right now and whatever your pace is, slow it down by 3 to 4 minutes, I guarantee you could run a 10K or longer. You could probably run 10 miles and you might be a little sore, but it wouldn't be that big of a deal. The only hard thing would be running that slow for that long, but that's a mental thing, not a physical thing.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And in terms of breathing as well, because I think it's worth touching upon, I just feel sometimes that runners don't really know that much about breathing. And sometimes runners as well, or just people in general, they put breathing into the one basket. They don't differentiate between what one breathing exercise can do versus another one. And when it comes to ultramarathon or endurance events, it can be very important to be able to conserve energy. And if you can do more with your breath, you're not wasting energy. So breathing should be trained. What's
Oh,
your take on that?
yeah, well, one of the biggest mistakes in marathons and ultramarathons is going out too fast because, of course, you got the adrenaline. And I'm on the microphone, talking to the runners before it starts. I say, everybody goes, for most of you, the elites are in the front. They're going to sprint no matter what. But for 90% of them, I always go, slow down. You're going to be all excited and you're going to go out and you're going, this is great. And then 26 miles in, you're going to be cursing my name. That's because you went out too fast. So it's always about the slowing down. And I think physiologically, as I've heard you say, the less breaths you take, the less diaphragm, the less musculature energy wasted, and so you're conserving physiology by slowing your breath down too. And it's just interesting to see runners. I was my first entry into running was not into breath work. Sorry, was Wim Hof. In 2017 or 16, I did his 10-week course. I still do cold therapy daily, most days, but I do zero Wim Hof breathing. My assessment of that, and I'd love your take on this actually, as I transitioned away from it, and when I was researching just general breath work, I was coming from a stress perspective, and so I landed on yours because it was definitely in line with how I coach people. But the Wim Hof, when you're mocking the hyperventilation, you're stressing your body out. Now, some of the oxygen advantage exercises are stressful; they're hormetics, holding the retention. But when you're going into that hyperventilation, it's an adrenaline hit. And I found that it wasn't helping me sleep. It was an added stress on an already very stressful life. And what I really needed to do was to incorporate things that were going to balance the stress of my life effectively so that overall I was sitting at a lower stress space. And so that's why I dropped Wim Hof completely. However, it worked okay on my first couple ultramarathons because as I was going up hills, I started to do the Wim Hof breathing, not the hold, but at least the breathing. And people stopped me. Are you okay? I go, yeah, I'm fine. But I'm doing this because I'm generating so much CO2. I am kicking it out enough to kind of keep me going. And I would stop every now and then and sort of recover that way. And I'll still pop a little bit of that if I'm on a particularly big hill. I'll transition to mouth and I'll sort of get into that hyperventilation state a little bit. And then again, as soon as the top of the hill comes, I'm back into my nose and pretty quick. So it's interesting just from that perspective. How do you see it, the hyperventilation? I just want to ask you, like, what is your take on that in terms of that? How it fits
I
in an
suppose,
overall stress management place?
yeah, like hyperventilation, I speak to quite a few people, even a group last night, and they get results from it in terms of a release of emotions,
Okay.
a reset, and also they're deliberately hyperventilating to experience the symptoms of hyperventilation. So if they then had a panic attack or hyperventilation attack, they don't feel so uncomfortable because they know what those symptoms are. Now, when you combine the Wim Hof method, I think it's very interesting. The personality of a founder is always going to trickle down to the technique. He's an extreme athlete. He really pushes his body. And if you do hyperventilation and a breath hold and hyperventilation, breath hold, hyperventilation, breath hold, your blood oxygen saturation goes below 60%. I've
Correct.
seen results going to 50%,
I've been
40%,
below 50. I've been below 50 many times.
even
Doing,
30%.
oh yeah.
I would be afraid to practice it. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying it in a bad way.
Yeah.
I just feel that, if the safety mechanism of the brain is that you pass out when your blood oxygen saturation is dropping too low, the brain, that's not just there for the fun of it.
Yeah. I know.
That safety mechanism has evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. And when the body senses that your blood oxygen saturation is too low, I don't think it's good.
Yeah.
But we
It's a
don't
stress.
know the result, I suppose, Sid, the question here is there's a stress and there is a major stress.
Yeah.
And the other question that I would say is that I sometimes feel that different breathing exercises suit different people.
Hmm.
For me, I don't feel a draw towards hyperventilation and breath holding. Maybe I'm biased but I could be teaching with Oxygen Advantage. We have no tradition.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Right. You could teach it.
we can teach anything. We can teach, like, ultimately the breath is the breath. We can
Yeah.
alter breathing. I could create any breathing exercise as anybody else can do. It's quite
Yeah.
easy, you know.
Yeah.
But I think there's a line that I don't want to cross. So that's
I'm with you, and that's why I gave that up. I also will say, and I'll try to say this delicately, I never drank the Kool-Aid. And
mm,
what I mean by that is there's a cult of personality in that world that I'm not attracted to. In my third book, Six Truths, I call it the subtle cult. And so while I'm not going to devalidate whatever the word is, somebody's emotional release, I think there's a little bit of doing it in groups. There's sort of that placebo kind of that thing going on, could be great. I'm actually,
yeah,
placebo is kind of amazing. However,
yep.
again, from where I wanted to come from as a coach and just personally, Oxygen Advantage was interesting to me, and when I teach classes, I do some wellness stuff at a resort called the Stanford Inn. Is I teach people and I say, listen, you can do Wim Hof, but that's not how you want to breathe all the time.
Mm,
And what I like about Oxygen Advantage, it is focused, and I have seen this change in me on creating a breathing habit that is most of your day without thinking about it. And that's what I found. I'll be in a meeting. It can be a contentious meeting, and I'm all instinctually, boo, in my nose, calming down. I mean, this has been so cool for me over the last few years. You have some sort of meeting and it's uncomfortable, and later you go, gosh, I wish I had said this thing. I've had more moments where I've gone, I said the thing I wanted to say. And it's not because I didn't know what to say. It's because I was in my breath and I'm calming down and I'm minimizing my inhale and I'm extending my exhale just without even thinking about it. And that's because when I am thinking about it, I'm doing breath exercises. As I told you before we turned the recording on, I probably do an hour and a half to 2 hours of breath work a day. Now, people listening to that go, I don't have the time. I do it in my car on the way to work. I do it I'll take breaks throughout the day. If I get out of my car and walk to the post office to get my mail, I do a breath in, breath out, and hold and walk in there and extend. And I'd probably do 8 to 10 of those per day. I do breath work while I'm running. I'll do retentions during training. On my way to going off to sleep, headphones go on. I go to my breath work. And so I started with 4-6, and I've been experimenting lately with extending that. I'm at 3-9, then I go 3-12. And one of them as I do 3-17 now. I do a 20-second, and I can do that at the end of like a good 10 or 15 minutes of breath work. I can go to 3 inhale and 17 exhale, and for like 15, 10 minutes, and with some air hunger, but not a lot. And that's been kind of a cool thing to see, like, can I calm myself down to that level where it's just like, okay, I guess I can slow it down this much.
I like everything you said there. I think breathing should be accessible. I think it's a tremendous function that we can draw upon and we can tap into. And I also feel in my own personal experience, and also, with people that are putting it into practice, your ability to deal with stress right there
That's
in the
it.
moment, and such as a meeting or giving a presentation or doing an interview, or if there's an uncomfortable situation, that you can bring your attention into the body. You're just taking a soft breath in through the nose and a relaxed and slow, gentle breath out. By doing that, you're telling the brain that you're safe. The brain isn't going to go into a fight or flight response. And then you've got more clarity to come up with a solution. And I suppose the other thing is, the beauty about it is that there's nothing for anybody to see.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. And sometimes the simplicity of the breath, and sometimes we are drawn to techniques that are very out there and very noticeable. And, when you do some of the oxygen advantage, it's so subtle that you don't see it, but there's a power that lies in that too. Um, when we think we go through life and we are not given the skills to be able to get out of our head, put the critical mind aside, to improve our concentration, to be able to direct all of our attention on doing what we're doing, or to self-regulate, it's pretty amazing. I'm going to come back to running.
Yep.
Do you think there's going to be a time that nose breathing is going to, at the moment, I would imagine that all of your competitors, and many people are on that race that you direct, typically, a few hundred people, is it?
150 is what I cap it at.
150.
Mhm.
So it's likely that 125 of those are mouth breathing for the 50K.
Probably.
Do you think there's going to be a time, and that's normal because it's about 95%. Do you
Yeah.
think there's going to be a time that runners will start to realize the benefits of breathing in and out through the nose?
I think so. I think so. I will also add, I hear people talk about, some elite ultra runner. They say, they eat pizza and drink margaritas and they're winning races. I go, yeah, but let me see them in 10 years. So it's not like people can't run ultra marathons and be mouth breathers. Of course, most people do, as you said. What is interesting to me as a coach, and also, again, I'm 56 years old. I want to keep doing the sport. Every year that I've had my race, it'll be in its 8th year. I have over 70s finish my race every year. This year I have 2, so I've had up to 4 or 5. These are 70-year-old plus people crossing the finish line and going, man, great race, and then going off to get a beer. And so I'm looking at that both personally and with my coaching is that's kind of cool at 70, which means you can do mouth breathing and you can do all the things that people do, and you can do the top 10 lists and you can do the keto madness or whatever you're doing, and you can have the results so called, but is it sustainable long term? That's my interest in terms of the coaching that I do, is can you keep up doing the things you love for as long as you can? So to that end, it just means more of us need to be out there talking the talk and discussing nasal breathing and writing about it in my Ultra Running for Normal People book. These are the things that introduce, well, what's that about? Because it was totally new to me. Again, Wim Hof has a great marketing, whatever. And that was my first thing into him, was what's this thing? And getting into a 39-degree tub with no stress response of, is kind of cool that I can control myself. But see, now I go in with the oxygen advantage method. I don't do hyperventilation. I do slow breathing, and I go in and I keep myself calm. And every time I do it, it's totally uncomfortable and horrible for about 30 to 45 seconds, and then it mellows out. But I'm very in control. That's why the science on the cold, and even the science on Wim Hof, gotta tell you, is kind of in its infancy. Again, I don't drink the Kool-Aid. I look at this. Where's the science on it? For me, it's mental. It's that little moment of doing something I don't want to do that's super uncomfortable, but it doesn't take that long. And I get to overcome that every day. And again, the nasal breathing of calming myself is exactly what you said, which is I'm sending my body a message that this is safe. It's going to be suck. I'm not going to stand there for 15 minutes and get hypothermia. I'm going in for 2 minutes, and it's going to be okay. I get to have the control over my physiology via my breath to tell my body this is okay. I do the same thing, by the way, if I wake up at 3 a.m. with, which I will coming soon as my race approaches, as I'm having anxiety about just organizing a big race with people coming from all over the country. It's stress inducing. 3 a.m. I don't try to push back on the critical mind and go, stop thinking that. I just go into my breath, tell my body, listen, this isn't actually a lion chasing you. You're going to be okay. This is an ultra marathon. This isn't actually life threatening. But the body doesn't know that. It's interpreting your stress and it's going into a stress response as if it's being chased by a lion. And it's our job I believe, via breath, but also via how we eat and sleep and everything else, to tell the body, hey, it's okay. I got this. It's stressful, but it's not that kind of stress.
At the very start, you spoke about when you were normally working with your clients, you would normally start with diet. And then when you were teaching breathing, you kind of push diet down the road a little bit. So you focused on breathing first, and you found that changing breathing patterns. And I have to assume that because sleep quality is going to improve, that it changed in the way that people see food, but also the food that they eat. Can you just expand a little bit on that? Because I find that that's quite an interesting topic, and people will be listening to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I run it's called Small Steppers. So I'm very much in the mindset of like, it's not a fixed amount of time in the world. It's teaching people how to perceive, and I still use it. I'm writing a new book right now. I use my same approach, which is in the beginning with this overwhelming task in front of me, I start by just opening the file on my screen, not even writing anything. I just open the file, and that's my beginning. It's a small, just kind of to avoid overwhelm. Well, initially, when I started running Small Steppers and the program, I have an online program and also private coaching, it was very much in that applying that system to food. In other words, you may know how to eat whatever you think is healthy because you've read 15 books about it. But today, start by having an apple first thing in the morning. Maybe that's your small step. I've had other people who have cancer. Their small step is to change their diet pretty overnight. But that's for them, no problem, no stress, no overwhelm. So I'm teaching people how to change that. But it's all from that framework and that system. But what was interesting is food is such a trigger point. And because I've been a long-time nutritionist, 15 years, people would come to me and just assume food right out of the chute. And I have some writing things to do at the beginning just to kind of push it off. But when breathwork came in, I thought, well, I'm going to push it off even further. Because as we talked about food, I could just see it filling their brains. That's all they want to talk about. Measuring and counting and weighing, I don't do any of that stuff. So it was already it's always a battle anyways, because I have a different kind of approach about that. But it was a battle right away, and it was a distraction from the real work, which is how to come out your life on your terms, how to live your life on your terms, how to not do what Sid tells you to do. Again, that's the guru problem, but how to learn how to live your life on your terms, knowing how you want to live. Breathwork became such a huge part of my work that it allowed me to kick off the discussion of food by, I'm not kidding, 4 to 6 weeks. And I've had some battles with clients. They go, well, I want to talk about it now. I go, the fact that you're that aggro about it means we're going to kick it off another 2 weeks. You're in or you're out on this because I'm not playing that game. You've yo-yo dieted 17 times before you came to me. I always say to my clients, I go, you've seen this movie before. You know how it ends. You get all excited about food and you make these drastic changes and you lose weight and then you gain it back every time. We're not doing it this way. So we're going to come into the breath. And you know what the vagus nerve, the parasympathetic, what do they call it? It's the what side of the autonomic? The rest and what? What is it?
Digest.
So as a nutritionist, how incredible is that for me to tie breathwork in, rest and digest? So people have digestion problems, and I go, we'll talk about your food later, but why don't we get the stress balanced and managed first so that digestion's kicking in a little bit better? Then when we ease into food changes, all the better. And if you're looking back at the running thing, how to eat during an ultramarathon, you have to eat during an ultramarathon. You can't be out for 8 or 9 hours and not consume food. Well, again, training your body how to digest because you're stress managed, it's more efficient in its running of it, no pun intended, but in the running of the body, more efficient. So I kick the food down, stress management first, breath for weeks. Then clients have reported, they go, I'm eating a lot better now. We haven't even talked about food yet. Because when they're coming to food and sitting down, in the past, they'd be reactive. Chips would come into the office and they would eat American chips, not your. Anyways, and so
Mm.
they're eating chips or candy, and they tell me I lose control. I'm a binger. This is their language, and yet with breath work in place, they go, yeah, candy came in. I had one piece and I walked away. I haven't even talked about food with them, and even if I had, do you think they don't know that candy's not good for them? It's not the issue of knowledge. It's that they want to live life on their terms. They want to have the control to say, I just want one piece instead of a whole bowl, which I can't stop myself. And I see that as a breath issue and a stress issue, not a food issue. People want to read the book about candy. I go, you already know it's not good for you. Why are you still eating it if you don't want to? And by the way, if you want to eat it, eat it. Again, their terms, not mine. But that's how breath has allowed people to actually eat healthier before I even talked about food.
It's really interesting. I'm writing a book on sleep at the moment, and due to be finished by next week. So I only touched a small bit on sleep. And then I was thinking it's very common for people to have poor sleep. So that ties in, of course, with the autonomic nervous system. 8.4% of people in the United States take sleeping pills. So they're not able to sleep well. And then you've got about between 25 to 50% of people having sleep apnea. So if sleep is off, then the person is waking up feeling very tired. And if they're feeling very tired, they will resort to food to help give them energy. But the
Right.
problem is that they're going
And
to
caffeine.
resort caffeine, of course, and the food that they're going to choose to give them energy is going to be the food that's going to give them the quick hit. But that's going to be the ultra processed.
Well, and also it's I don't even know if there's two things about that. Yes, they will go for that kind of junk food thing, but there's two reasons for that. One, they might consciously say this will give me energy, but so will an orange. So what they're going for is, let's face it, smoking, junk food, drugs, these will alleviate stress in the moment, not long term. They don't make you healthier, but they are stress relievers. And so I've called junk food drugs in my podcast. I go, it's drugs. Can we just be honest about it? Because then we can just be like, I do it once in a while. I don't do it a lot. It's drugs. I'll have a bourbon on occasion, but so they're going to go in this overtired. They're going to go for those energy drinks. They're going to go for this Snicker bar or whatever unhealthy thing is. And part of that is, I guess, quick energy. But for me, a lot of it is the stress, man. I'm stressed and I want to feel better. What better place to go to than McDonald's? That's how I was raised. If you have a bad day, cheese pizza, there's nothing like it. So if you can actually, when you're not eating the cheese pizza, be doing stress management work via, again, breath work as a major player, but also other things, then you don't need the cheese pizza as much. And as a coach and as a nutritionist, I knew right out of the chute within 2 months of practicing. This was the inspiration of my first book. I knew right away, oh, this isn't about food. This is not about food. This is how you are around food. And that's when I was like, oh, wait a second. And so I backed right back off. I don't want to make people think more about food. I want to have people think less about food. And that way, when they're around food, they enjoy it more and they can make choices that are in line with who they are and how they want to be. And that's a different ballgame. So when you wake up feeling rested, that's why, or you're doing breath work all day, you're feeling that you're making choices that are in line with you. You might want to have a beer, but it's by choice and not a reaction. And that's when there's no guilt and shame about it afterward. They go, yeah, I had a pizza, so what? But before they work with me, they go, I had a pizza and I feel bad. And then they don't sleep well because they're super stressed. And then you have more pizza because they don't want to feel bad. And then there's this roller coaster. And then the weight comes on and everything else, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's did you ever kind of check in on your state of mind and wonder, has your thought activity, a lot of people, they overthink. Have you noticed any change in your thinking patterns? Okay, you do talk about its relation with food, but if you're paying attention to your breath at different parts during the day, driving into work, if you're going to the shop, if you're going to the post office, different parts, you're actually getting out of your head. So you're not you're not lost in thought. You're not trapped in that endless thinking. Has that helped you overall in terms of, and can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, massively helped. And it's interesting because my small stepping program, not trying to sell, but it's just what it is is people come to me sometimes to tackle productivity issues. In other words, they go, Sid, have you written 4 books? You're super busy. I go, because I know how to open my laptop for 10 minutes while I'm waiting for my daughter to get out of ballet. And I can get into that and be focused for those 10 minutes. Years ago, I was living in Los Angeles, and this buddy of mine was a professional screenwriter. and he had a kid, and he used to go to a studio all day and write screenplays or whatever. And he has a kid, and I go, "How do you get work done?" He goes, "Sid, now when I show up to my studio, I get more work done in an hour than I ever did in 8 hours before." And so it was, yes, he spent 8 hours in his studio, but it was not efficient 8 hours. And so I have talked about my program in general as mental toughness. There's a lot of perception of woo-woo and hippie stuff when it comes to breath work. The reason why I like Oxygen Advantage so much and why I'm such a huge fan is because you talk about the science and the literature. You talk about it's not, and again, no knock, do Qigong, it's fine. But the way that this has affected and infected my whole life has been amazing because I'm out of my head more often. So when I'm in and working, I can focus in. I'm not scattered. I'm not burnt out. So when I need to get the work done, I'm very efficient in the work that I do. I can get a lot of work done in a very small amount of time, which allows me to then have more free time to do other things like be with my family, for instance. So there's that, that there's a crossover with meditation, but I don't meditate. I do breath work. That's what I do. And if I'm in my car, and I love music and I listen to it, but most days if I'm going to work, I put an app on that goes 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out, or 3-9 is what I've been doing more recently. And I do that all the way in because I'm going to work, because I want to walk in my door. I'm an executive director of a nonprofit that works with the local state parks, which is kind of cool, because that's what my run is, on a state park. And so I'm coming to work in a more focused, calm place to start. So yeah, I'm very much in my head. This has brought me very much out of my head. And the other thing I have is a digital recorder in my car, because as I'm breathing, all of a sudden ideas come in, but like not stress reactive, but like, oh, this would be a cool idea for a whatever, even song lyrics. And I have my thing and I just, and I put this thing back down and I have ideas. And so it creates this kind of environment where things can come in that maybe weren't allowed to come in before, because you're talking about your grocery list, or whatever the chatter is in your brain, right? So it's been cool on that level too.
Yeah, it's amazing. So yeah, it's looking at all of, I suppose you can't really isolate one from the other in terms of human, very often people look at one function, they look at physical exercise, and they don't necessarily make a connection with that to breathing or to
Or to
sleep
food, or to food,
or to
or to
food.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
am integrating all of those things because I'm not working with elite athletes. If I worked with an elite runner, most of our discussion would be running and then probably diet. But even elite athletes, as you know better than I do, sleep is massive
Mhm.
for them. But their job is to work. I mean, if you're a professional athlete, let's say a professional athlete, your job is to exercise. And then have efficient recovery and really, really effective recovery. But I'm working with people who are running or doing swimming or whatever their sport is, and working a full-time job and raising kids. Sorry, the thumbs up on the Zoom thing. Anyways, and doing all this thing. And so I am trying to achieve, by the way, via breath work, a bird's eye view, so they can look at their life and say, well, if I'm going to train for an ultra marathon, I need to be a little tighter on my sleep, a little more um, disciplined sleep time, like in bed at the sort of the same time, and getting the lights off in your house in a way that's not freaking your brain out with the melatonin and that kind of thing. And then, and paying attention to my diet and doing more breath work during the day. If I'm not training with something, I'm a little more lax on that kind of stuff. Again, can you eat junk food and run an ultra marathon faster than I can? Probably. But my goal isn't that day. It's keeping to do this for a long time, which means when I'm training for an ultra marathon, I don't think, oh, I can eat whatever I want because I'm running 50 miles a week. I think I got to tighten up my diet because I'm running 50 miles. I see where the stress lies in what I do, and I counteract that in most cases with breath work. But I also eat a healthy diet most days too, and I also keep a pretty tight sleep schedule most days as well. And I always say most days because I'm with clients always conscious of avoiding militancy, because militancy is stress. So if you start thinking I can't eat anything unhealthy ever, you're stressed about food. And so I've had clients where I'm like, listen, I need you to eat junk food on Saturday. And that's because I can see them. They're already, now they're there. They go again, holding on so tight. And then the breath starts to increase because they're just all about food. And I go, on purpose, eat unhealthy food Saturday night. There's no guilt and shame about it. You made the decision Sunday, get up, start eating well again. And then we're good most days. But you start going into the militancy realm, you're heading for damage almost every time.
So, So you seem to be quite observant then of a person's breath, just that last point. So you're working with a client and you start noticing if their breathing is getting a little bit faster and harder. And to most people, that's going to go unnoticed, but you're able to pick up on it, and you're able to determine on the basis of that they're going into a little bit of a stress response. Do you do that consciously, or is it just happening as a result of your awareness of breathing in general?
That I think that, I mean, I could always tell, I had a pretty good sense of in general stress going up, especially in the way that they talk, their language. I'm pretty good about clients. If they ask a question about food, I can pretty quickly see that it's about their level of stress is going up about it. They're thinking about it too much. And I've had clients where I'm like, put your nutrition books in the garage. You read them, you know enough about it. Now the hard work begins of how do we pull this off in a way that's long lasting. So I can see the stress go up when it's like, well, what about this? What about this? I go, you already know that. Let's talk about it later. Because it's such a trigger point. Now with the breath element, I can watch the shoulders go up in the discussion of it. I can see the upper chest thing going on and the language, and I can kind of pick up and I go, hey, let's jump right into a excuse me, let's just jump right into a 4-8 breath, which is going to be pretty uncomfortable. But if you can be, and I think I love about Oxygen Advantage too is you're not trying to make the air hunger go away. You're becoming more comfortable of what feeling. Just like you said with Wim Hof, like they know now what it feels like to be in hyperventilation. I think it's more effective in day-to-day breathing to be okay with a mild air hunger. So as I'm trying to calm myself down, let's say, I come into after a run, I go right into my car now after a run, a long run. I took a 2-hour trail run on Saturday, got in my car and immediately go to 3-9 on the app. It's sound by sound, 3-9. So the first few breaths, as you know, it's going to be some air hunger. But because I know what that feels like and I know I'm safe, within a minute or two, I can feel it's almost drug-like. I mean, really, you feel euphoric. It feels very relaxed and you feel really good. And I know what I'm doing for my body, which is slowing everything down and allowing me to facilitate better recovery. So I can kind of be okay with that little bit of air hunger because I know what's coming on the other side of that. And that's again why I get in the cold tub too. It's can we overcome these conscious decisions to be uncomfortable for overall lower stress and a better efficiency of body and mind.
Yeah, it's training the brain not to react to discomfort. And I
That's right.
suppose just even to make the point, the air hunger, people often associate it with a lack of oxygen,
Yeah.
but that's not the case. It's an
CO2.
increase in carbon dioxide. I must send you on George Dallam's paper. He had it published fairly recently. So he looked at endurance athletes and he said that a lot of them, they can have cardiac fibrosing, scarring of the heart muscle as a result of hyperventilation
Interesting.
during long distance running over their lifetime. So it's not something that just happens over a few weeks or something, but it's over many, many years. And he put the proposition that nasal breathing would help to prevent that. Because if an athlete, and what you were describing, is breathing in and out through the nose, they're going to have higher carbon dioxide in the lungs and blood. And the increased carbon dioxide in the blood is going to increase blood flow and oxygen to the heart. So even though the heart is working harder, it's also going to have its own increased blood flow and oxygen supply.
That's right.
And that can be very helpful for cardiac health. So I have a feeling, Sid, we're going to start seeing little inroads coming into
Yeah.
the sport world. And I know your thing about you work mainly with normal people, which I love that word, normal people. Uh, and elite athletes, I see a role for breathing big time with them. We've worked with quite a
Sure.
few in different disciplines, especially around the recovery part of it.
That's right.
You know, is there still is there a greater awareness now of recovery, or is it still kind of pushed down the road a bit?
No, I think recovery in the since I've been in this world for 15 years, I think there's a great focus on recovery in elite athletes for sure. I mean they're sort of I mean any coach worth her or his salt is gonna be highly focused on recovery because if you can't recover well, you can't train well. So but I think breath is still missing out of that. So recovery is maybe rest and it's maybe diet or whatever it is. But breath work is sort of that missing link. And what I love again about OA is that it's a natural, I see it and you as a natural way to breathe. This is not training the body to breathe in a new way. A new way for humans. We're nose breathers most of the time. And when we breathe through the mouth, it's because we were being chased by a lion. Well, how to bring that back into our lives in the modern world? How do we bring in a more natural, functional, I don't like the word functional, it's kind of been ruined for me, but a more natural way of breathing by doing these exercises when we can, so that when we're not thinking about it, we're breathing better. And I have just, I've been on a run and I'm going, oh, I'm nasal breathing. I sort of notice it afterwards, which is very different. When I first started, I had to consciously nasal breathe and consciously battle through that whole air hunger thing and slow down. And now I'm kind of, I'm breathing through my nose right now. My mouth is closed. That's super weird. And so that's because of the work that, the exercises affect. And so it's a natural way of breathing. And I think it's the missing link. I think it's the missing link of athletes, elite and non, uh, that should be a player as big or bigger than anything else that an athlete does, is how they're breathing most of the time and during training. And that goes for normal people and elite athletes.
When you first switched from mouth to nose breathing, and how many weeks do you think it took before you kind of got the hang of it, that you felt comfortable, that the air hunger wasn't so strong? Because I'm just thinking that some people might be put off, if they're thinking, well, it's going to take 2 months or 3 months or 4 months, but it can happen quite easily. But what was your experience with it?
Yeah, I
Do you
mean,
remember?
I had a decent, yeah, I do. I had a decent fitness, endurance baseline. I had already done, 3 or 4 ultras at this point. I was, running a decent amount, not as much as people would think. But it was hard, and I was already a slow runner because I had been coached that way, and I took on that and was seeing that. And again, I have to say, not because of my data with a runner, but as running data, pacing and whatever else. And I don't wear a heart rate monitor, but because I was able to recover better and feel better in my life in general. And so I had that kind of baseline. I was already coaching people. I was coming from a stress management perspective. So there was a transition. There's no doubt about it. Like I said, I think it was probably 4 to 6 weeks of taping my mouth shut, where all of a sudden I didn't have to take the tape off at some point. I could sleep throughout the night. That's probably 4 to 6 weeks. And I would say running was probably 3 to 4 to 5 weeks, if I had to guess. What I would tell people is, this is why coming at it from a stress place and having a bird's eye view of their life, what are you really trying to achieve here? If you're trying to achieve being able to exercise and do the things you love in whatever sport that is, taking 3 or 4 weeks, or in my case with my program, 12 weeks to change your diet, that's going to last for the next 30, 40, 50 years of your life, totally worth it. It's a drop in the bucket, because your goal isn't to win a race. At least the people I work with, it's to live a good life. It's to live an elite life, not be an elite athlete. And there's no knock. It's just not my arena. It's not my movie. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in, like, how do people pull this off when they're 56 and like I am, or 60 or 65, and they're trying to change the game for themselves. Kind of cool that they're taking that on. Like, I can change my life at 65. I've worked with 70-year-olds who are like, all right, let's game on. Let's do this. I want to hike the Appalachian Trail. And so how can we do that? In which case, 3 to 4 to 5 weeks is nothing. So you walk a little bit more on a run, and 2 weeks before you were running the whole time. Now you're slowing down to a walk, but you're transitioning your breath. But it's going to allow you to do this longer forever, and you're going to feel better in your body, and you're going to enjoy your life in general, and you're going to sleep better because you're not pushing too hard. Small price to pay, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful. I think the conversation was great. I think we've covered so many good points. Here. So 1 second. And so this is Sid's book. So it's called Ultra Running for Normal People. And I'm assuming this is on Amazon and
Yeah, it came out with Penguin Random House. It's Blue Star Press, and so it's everywhere, stores and everything. In the UK as well. And
Right.
yeah, it's done pretty well. I think it's the subtitles, Life Lessons Learned on and Off the Trail. So it was teaching to ultra running and teaching me to breathe, to versatility, just moving through fear, all those kinds of, so the general lessons. But it's also a guidebook for people who might want to take on the sport, who think, I could never do that. It's like you'd be surprised, and so that's the idea of that book. Yeah.
Great stuff. Well, I think that's great closing remarks, Sid. So thanks very much. And
Such a
what's your
pleasure being
next
here.
what's your next book coming out?
I don't know. I'm writing it right now, but it's a novel.
Oh,
So it's
wow.
yeah. I've had four books published, sort of in the health, health and happiness realm, philosophy. I got my bachelor's degree in philosophy from UCLA, so it's kind of infected the work I do as a health coach and running coach. But the new one's a novel, so we'll see what happens. I talked to my publisher, and they go, "We don't do novels." I was like, "Okay, so I got to start from scratch on that one." So, anyways, and so we'll see how that comes out. But I'm small stepping it, so every day, little by little, So I'm just building out, about a third
Good
done.
stuff.
Yeah.
And your website name?
SidGarza-Hillman.com. And from there, you can go to my YouTube channel and my podcasts and, the books and everything else. That's a good portal to go. I'm not on social media, so that's the place to be is SidGarza-Hillman.com. And also smallsteppers.com if you're looking for the coaching. So whatever. Yeah.
Great. Pleasure.
Cool.
Thanks very much,
That's
Sid.
so great. Thanks, Patrick.